The Institute for Integrative Conservation, or the IIC, was established in 2020 thanks to a gift from a generous alumna who recognized the opportunity for William & Mary to build partnerships in conservation. Our mission is to empower an inclusive community of leaders who can deliver timely and innovative solutions to the world's most pressing challenges. We seek to co-design research projects in collaboration with external conservation partners in order to support their goals. And together we take an integrative approach to conservation, exploring the linkages between biodiversity, human communities, and well-being. The IIC's Conservation Research Program is one of our key strategies for realizing this mission. The year-long program matches William & Mary undergraduate students from across majors, local students from areas where the conservation work is being done, William & Mary faculty from across various schools and departments in the school, and external conservation organizations to complete applied research proposed by those external partners as needed to advance their outcomes. Last spring, the students developed research proposals in collaboration with their conservation partners. Over the summer, they completed their research full-time and are now busy analyzing their results and will complete deliverables as defined by their partners. And it is through this collaboration on applied research that we aim to support real-world conservation solutions, as well as nurture the next generation of compassionate and effective conservation leaders. This year, we have 33 William & Mary undergraduate students, 10 young professionals or students from the areas where the conservation work is being done, 17 faculty mentors from across William & Mary, and 25 external conservation partners who are working together to complete 17 applied research projects. And these teams tackle a diverse range of projects spanning the natural and social sciences as well as the humanities. Today, you'll have the opportunity to hear their preliminary findings. We have so many incredible stories from student research this year that we had to divide the presentations into a morning and afternoon session. This morning, we heard 9 presentations, including most of our international projects. And this afternoon, from 2 to around 3:30, we'll hear 8 presentations that are mostly focused on our domestic projects. And after the presentations, we invite you to all join us for a reception in the Hive Cafe. There's a lot of delicious food, and you'll have an opportunity then to interact with students, learn more about ways you can get involved in the IIC, as well as just celebrate all the great work that's happening here. After each student presentation, I have asked their conservation partners to provide a brief reflection on the broader context of their work. We have both a Zoom audience and an in-person audience today, and these presentations will be recorded and will be up on the IIC's YouTube page. Since we have so many presentations, we're going to ask you to hold questions for the student presenters for the reception. But if you're joining us via Zoom, feel free to type your questions for students in the chat, and we'll share it with the students after their presentations. Before we begin, I'd like to express my gratitude for our amazing external conservation partners for inviting William & Mary to collaborate with you in your important work. I would also like to thank all of the amazing faculty mentors who have been guiding the students through these incredible research projects. I'd also like to thank the IIC team, especially my new partner in crime, Dr. Richard Boyachi, for all of his hard work in preparing and for joining our team. And especially Kathy Francillo, who really is the one who made everything happen behind the scenes as far as paperwork and travel logistics and making everything happen. I would like to thank the broader IIC community of alumni, parents, and community members who have made this program possible, and want to thank you all for being here today to listen to all these incredible stories. To begin, I'm going to invite Sophia Polit, who was up here presenting last year as a CRP student, and she's going to read the William & Mary Land Acknowledgement.
Okay. So William & Mary acknowledges the Indigenous peoples who are the original inhabitants of the lands our campus is on today. The Chiranaca-Nottoway, Chickahominy, Eastern Chickahominy, Mattaponi, Monacan, Nansemond, Nottoway, Pamunkey, Patawomic, Upper Pataponi, and the Rappahannock tribes, and pay our respect to their tribal members past and present.
And next, I'd like to invite our Director of Innovation and Entrepreneurship, Troy Wiipongwii, up, and he's going to introduce the first student team that's going to be presenting. You should just invite them up in there.
Okay. I had the pleasure of working with this team of 3 people, Chloe, Jude, and Cindia, over the past year with some of our community partners, trying to better understand the factors of success that would lead to a more sustainable regional food system for Indigenous communities. Each of them were working on a unique part of the project that really helps to empower decision-making within our communities. And we're going to have a larger summit in spring of 2026 that would allow us to showcase some of these findings and prepare the community for kind of implementing their strategies. So with that being said, do you all want to?
Hi, everyone. So today we first wanted to start by asking everyone to reflect on what did you have for lunch today? Maybe why did you choose to have it? Was it something you enjoyed? Was it something that was convenient? Was it nourishing? As these questions become more diverse and different answers in the United States, the food in the US has started to take a new role, as it's not something that's necessarily you take time and energy to put into, but it's something that is increasingly more of a convenience. So we hope to answer these questions and also explore the ways that food can change in our culture by supporting the expansion of Indigenous foodways.
Okay, so for those who are unfamiliar, a food system basically encompasses all the processes that take the food from the farm to the table. So production, processing, distribution, and consumption. And so basically, our project, for a little bit of background, there's a lot of political, social, and economic barriers that prevent Indigenous food systems from succeeding. As you can see, we have mass colonization and the genocide of Native Americans, as well as industrial agriculture, which kind of prioritizes, like speed and efficiency and has many like detrimental impacts for the environment.
As Professor Wiipongwii mentioned, there's obviously a lot of things that go into supporting the expansion of Indigenous foodways, and we all focused on different aspects for our project to lead to this larger goal of building out a sustainable food supply chain. I focused on defining metrics for success. In order to reestablish Indigenous foodways, there needs to be a larger shift in industrial and also in larger food supply chain methodology, because you need to be able to shift the larger focus in order to support regenerative practices and to support food sovereignty initiatives. Food sovereignty is basically the right to be able to choose what you eat, how you get it, how you consume it, and they're meant to serve and benefit the communities that they're working to help. And you cannot serve the communities you're working to help if you are evaluating it on Western metrics that may leave out some important goals of theirs. So that is why I was exploring how to define what success means, specifically ecological success, economic success, and community success. I conducted different interviews with Indigenous community members. I transcribed them, coded them, and then conducted a thematic analysis to answer those questions. Within those areas of success, I divided into goals, achievements, and uncertainties. Achievements is something that is what communities are already taking pride in and putting resources towards. Goals are obviously what they want to accomplish in the future. And uncertainties, I felt like, would reveal areas that are still working towards success, but they might not feel as achievable currently. So by looking at these 3 areas, I thought it would give a holistic view of what success is in economic, ecological, and community standards. So firstly, with environmental success, goals and uncertainties were the most prominent mentioned throughout all the interviews. Goals including land independence, the ability to reuse resources such as seeds, and just general gratitude and connection back to the land. This is inhibited by the time it takes to implement regenerative practices and concerns within the communities about that. And also just the general lack of protection against pollution in the United States that is prohibiting the use of traditional lands for agricultural purposes. For economic success, uncertainties were the most prevalent, which include the reliance on grants to fund community initiatives, while grants also lacked provisions that supported regenerative practices. And so some of the goals reflected this concern as wanting to have self-sufficiencies from these grants and financial systems that they felt inhibited the growth. All right. Lastly, for community success, goals and achievements were the most prevalent. Achievements included workshops that would support the reteaching of traditional methods for foods and also work to bolster community connection, which reflects the goals of reconnecting people back to traditional practices and lands. So overall, 90% of participants mentioned environmental goals and uncertainties, 60% mentioned economic goals and uncertainties, and 100% of participants mentioned some community achievements that they felt helped aid in what they thought would be success of a food system. So overall, Indigenous food systems aim to have regenerative practices with the environment and help the earth from the degradation that industrial activity brings to it. However, that's brought back with the community and reconnecting people back to the land and the traditional practices that were taken away through colonization. However, both of these face restraints because of economic constraints, because of economic areas such as resources revolving around Western ideals, such as the grants that I mentioned, and also restraints on involvement, such as time and things like that.
Okay, sweet. So as previously kind of talked about, while industrial agriculture does emphasize like speed and efficiency, it does that at the expense of human health. And so we can see this kind of in a couple different statistics. There's been a decline in crop diversity, fruit and vegetable consumption are going down. And this has led to various impacts on human health, obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular problems, and cancer as well. So what TEWFA and our research group is proposing is basically indigenous foods as a solution to this. Historically, indigenous peoples had very diverse diets that were regionally adapted. And we believe that incorporating indigenous foods into American diets could significantly improve public health outcomes. And so my part of the project was assessing market viability of nearly 4,000 indigenous plants. And this is an important part of the project because, as I said before, there are various economic, social, and political barriers that make it difficult to bring indigenous foods to market. This includes government restrictions, predatory business practices, and financial restraints on farmers. So it's really, you have to understand, like, can this actually be brought to market? Will it be like profitable? And so this is where I got my list of plants. And this is a really interesting database. It's super extensive. There's 4,000 different plants, and it's been built over decades, starting in the 70s. Okay, so these are a couple of the factors that I use. The current market use on a 1 to 5 scale, the conservation status, is it endangered? Like, will it be endangered if it's brought to market? A similar plant with high market value, food processing methods, and then the taste and edibility. And here are a lot of the main sources that I use for this. I have PFAF up there, and then this is Greg, NatureServe, and the IUCN Red List. And those two I mainly use for the conservation status. And these are more for like the food processing methods and stuff like that. Okay, and then, so as I said before, current market use is on a 1 to 5 scale, with these being like the tiers. It basically goes tier 1 is like very small home scale, and then tier 5 is industrial large scale. And so the way I determined this was basically using Google. I use like various retailers, local nurseries, and big manufacturers, Etsy, Amazon, Home Depot. And so what I was really looking for was tiers 2, 3, and 4. These are tiers that it has some market value, but it's not too much that the market is completely saturated, and it would be hard to like break into. So yeah, here are just some plants I chose to highlight. This is not by any means like the only plants that I thought were like had really high market value, but this is just like kind of to show my findings. And I also only assessed approximately 1,075, and there's 4,000, so a lot more work to do. But yeah, on the side here is cloudberries, pawpaw, Arium and the blackcurrant. And so, yeah, basically the reason I chose those plants is for two things. The importance of value-added processing. So this is taking a plant and doing something to it where you can add value to it. And this is really important for Indigenous farmers who face financial restraints. And then also the emphasis on nutrient content. So a lot of these plants can be healthy alternatives and they have high vitamin and mineral content. And the benefits of these two things is that there's less competition in the market and the unique alternatives can appeal to an untapped market base.
And basically, a big part of the research that I was working on was more so on the environmental aspect and moving away from that westernized perspective of what agriculture should look like. And market viability for a lot of indigenous plants includes moving away from that monocropping perspective that has been present within agriculture and moving into polycropping. And so I looked into the ecological importance of indigenous food systems and the need for understanding the different components that make these systems, while also directly looking into biodiversity and the resilience of these ecosystems. But really answering the question of why aren't there more systems in place currently within agriculture, and the need for that data availability for communities to be able to move towards more sustainable practices in agriculture. And for a big issue that we run into is, how do we know where to start? And a big thing in literature that we have noticed within indigenous knowledge that's based in agriculture, we have the Three Sisters Gardens, which includes beans, corn, and squash. And this has laid out a foundation for a lot of the indigenous knowledge we have about what polycropping could look like. And this is just kind of a layout of what an indigenous food system could look like, building it from different layers. And I've laid out 5 layers that were prevalent within my research: the canopy layer, understory, shrub, herbaceous, and ground layer. These layers, we looked into a lot of the biodiversity within them, looking into which layers provide the most food accessibility, which happened to be the herbaceous and shrub layer, but also using the information given by different communities to adapt it to this data as well. So I worked directly with NCG Food Database. This is a program that Dr. Wiipongwii coded through Python, and my job is basically to include the codes that different species were a part of in the layers that they grew in, but also taking into account which parts or sections of each plant had edible pieces and if they were used for medicinal or culinary purposes. Some of my key findings included the following. For food layers, the most diversity was found within the ground layer, edge layers, and herbaceous layers. And there was greater plant growth when there were more than one plant species present within a given section. And the knowledge shared within communities is vital to implementing these systems and also ensuring that information is made accessible to all communities. Some takeaways: applying indigenous food systems is important in our current state of agriculture. We have a lot of issues that we have to combat, but in order to make sustainable practices more present, we have to ensure to include these indigenous systems. And the Three Sisters Gardens provide a framework and promotes that use of permaculture as well, and also understanding the interaction between plants, while also taking into account the community/indigenous knowledge that is present. Now to tie it all together within our community, environment, and economic aspects, connecting all 3 parts of our projects, we hope that the market is diversifying, and that is needed for the success of indigenous food systems, but also connecting back the communities with the plant and everybody in their surroundings as well, and also incorporating more value-added processings and emphasizing nutrient contents within indigenous foods, while also taking into account the knowledge that is already present and making sure that knowledge is accessible to all who may need it.
So moving forward, we're each creating our own deliverable to try to help TEWFA in their mission. I will be creating a policy brief that summarizes the key findings and shows basically how to address those issues of governmental assistance programs with economic barriers, and how you can reframe what success looks like in the application for those programs to better be accessible to Indigenous communities and regenerative practices.
And yeah, as I said before, I was working on the database as a broader part of TEWFA's effort to recover the loss of Indigenous foods.
And for my deliverable, I will be working on an interactive simulation model that indicates the interaction between different plant species present within the data. And hopefully this will help people that may not have knowledge of ecology or biodiversity to be able to understand what it means to have permaculture and agriculture.
We would like to thank all of the Indigenous communities that worked with us throughout this project, our partners, our faculty mentors, TEWFA for this opportunity to complete this research, and the IIC, of course, for, again, the opportunity. And if you take one thing away from this, we hope that you just go forward with more consciousness about where you're getting your food, what your food means, and trying to, again, acknowledge the connection between what we're eating comes from the land and not necessarily just a grocery store. So thank you.
So I am going to invite Diosa Hall, who is an incredible chef. I think about her food every single day. A wild food forager and educator who's dedicated to the recovery and reinvigoration of Indigenous food systems, to unmute over Zoom and provide a brief reflection on the incredible work TEWFA is doing. Are you there, Diosa?
Yes, I am here. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I want to thank you guys for your takeaway from your experience that you had in the time that we spent together. I think that, you know, your observation is right on. I can't wait to see you guys in person because I have some amazing updates because I spent the entire summer and season in the woods learning some more. So you guys are doing amazing. And I want to let you know that I'm really proud of you for recognizing, you know, the needs. Sometimes it takes, you know, a different perspective and a fresh set of eyes. And I think you guys are that fresh set of eyes with your projects that you have and your knowledge and what you're learning and interpreting it in such a way that people can understand it. So, Troy, thank you for the opportunity to, you know, share that knowledge and to gather that information and to bring it to light here and to be able to share that here today. So everyone who was involved, thank you so much. I can't tell you how proud I am, you know, to be part of that and to see it in that way. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Diosa. Good job, you guys. We're
Thank
going to
you.
continue to talk about food. Next up, we have Kate Ingle and Amelia Kim, who worked with Dr. John Swaddle and with support from the Lane family to explore farmer perspectives on scaling regenerative agriculture.
Okay, thank you, Erica. I'm Kate Ingle. And I'm Amelia Kim. So, as you just heard, we all face a critical challenge. How do we continue to feed people while protecting the land? And who better to shape our solutions than the people living that challenge every day, the farmers? Now, there's no official definition of regenerative agriculture. So our working definition is that it's a resilient food system that improves physical, economic, and community well-being. This includes any agricultural practices that improve soil, community, and environmental health. Our goal is to facilitate the scaling of regenerative agriculture by highlighting the farmers' voices. Our work will inform farmers, policymakers, consumers, and agricultural organizations. As of now, we're not even halfway through our project. We've interviewed around 30 farmers so far from Maryland to South Carolina. Our research is ethnographic and multimedia, and we're continuing with a film, ethnography, website, and resource guide. With what we've learned so far, we developed a model to explain how any given farmers make their decisions.
Firstly, there has to be an input. Think of this model as existing within a matrix of ever-changing circumstances. That's the landscape. Next, we came up with 3 big categories that the input gets filtered through. There's the farmer's identity, which is considered temporally and applied to the farmer's demographics, beliefs, land, family, community, knowledge, and self-image. Second is influences, which are measured along a spectrum of personal connection. And lastly, there's resources divided into capital, information, and network. So our input has been plucked out of the landscape and has cycled through our three categories some number of times. Eventually, it will become a decision. We've categorized decisions into three kinds: livelihood, how do I make a living? Affirmation, where do I get the answers I trust? And farming, how do I run my farm? We want to hit home that everything on this model is fluid and that decisions feed back into the landscape of new inputs to be considered. This brings us to one of our key findings.
There are universal constraints, but no universal solutions. Everyone inherits certain constraints. Farmers inherit methods and ideologies from parents or mentors. They are given exact blueprints, often dictated by tradition. Consumers live in a world of universal availability. The consumer habit of buying, regardless of location or season, keeps local food waste suppressed. Academics are often bound by institutional bureaucracy, which can leave them a decade or more behind.
The second half of this finding introduces the dichotomy. Farmers are intensely individual. They defy categorization and often don't agree with each other. For example, who counts as a farmer? Farmers do not agree. So how can a single solution work for me just because it worked for a homesteader or for someone in a different climate zone? Policymakers and researchers continue to overlook these particularities, relying on broader generalizations to shape policy and practice. But we do have some solutions, all of which work by reframing the narrative to support a more holistically regenerative future.
So first, we have more, not bigger. So we began our research with the common preconception that scaling up means converting big conventional agriculture, represented by the square, to big regenerative agriculture, represented by the circle. However, farmers have said that we need to focus on supporting the little guy. So through education of local farmers, regenerative entrepreneurs, and consumers, we can shift the market, letting industrial agriculture die out.
Second, farmer-led innovation. We've repeatedly heard that land-grant institutions are years behind farmer innovations, yet these institutions hold most of the capital. For example, one farmer proposed the solution of the flipped grant model. Typically, grants set a premise and the farmers must conform to it. In the flipped model, a pool of funds is offered and farmers submit their own ideas, tailoring solutions to their specific environments.
Third, we have storytelling. Most farmers supported education as a solution, but traditional education is often unevenly distributed and entangled with issues of accountability. Storytelling bridges that gap, educating the farmer, the consumer, the academic, and the policymaker all at once. The keys are transparency, accessibility, and personal relevance.
We're telling multimedia stories with an ethnographic mindset, but the form matters less than the approach. When stories are told that reflect real individual and community truths, people listen, they learn, and they act. We want to leave you with something one of our farmers said. He brings into focus exactly the kind of perspective necessary to build resilient food systems in the future.
You're taking an interest in this space. That's actionable. That's regenerative. Because it's not just me, it's you. That's generating to the next group. That's the next evolution. And so for me, that's regenerative because it's never ending. We just wanted to say a big thank you to the Lane family, to Professor Swaddle, to the IIC, and to all the farmers who continue to make our project possible. Thank you for listening.
Stay up here. So I wanted to invite Ben Friton, who's one of our ongoing amazing conservation partners, who's supported both of these projects, and is the director of the Reed Center, which has become an incredible field station for William and Mary students to come and learn about how to reconnect our food systems and our day-to-day lives with our ecosystems, and also to learn about ourselves. So Ben, if you don't mind kind of giving a brief reflection on the broader context of the field.
Yeah, thank you all so much. This day's been really great to take part in. It's actually mixing my two careers. One is the difficulty of the work that everybody doing these projects has done, but the even harder job is to synthesize it into a 5-minute narrative. So part of what I wanted to bring forward is that some of what the students that I have been working with, and we had a lot of students and faculty out at our headquarters in Middletown, Maryland, is the grappling of applying systems thinking into this broader world with innumerable variables and so many of the mechanisms that the students are talking about are the detriment to human health, the detriment to the environment. And ultimately, it's because so many of the models that we are, say, working against or through do not take into account so many, they externalize so many of the things that are imperative to the work of the IIC. So with that, I just want to say that in the complexity of the systems that we're trying to bring into the world, understanding all of the economic levers, the various components of just within the farming community, agreeing on terms, all of these things take so much time and are so difficult. And the work of these students to navigate what feels often like a great unknown that they're swimming in, especially when trying to even get farmers to talk to them during the growing season in and of itself is one of the most difficult things and is a big part of why that community doesn't feel heard. And I just really appreciate the work of the IIC to try to illuminate that complexity and really go into those difficult spaces where it isn't just black and white and clear deliverables that you're, looking for. So thank you all so much.
Those two presentations made you really hungry and interested to learn more. TEWFA is hosting Indigenous Peoples Feast on November 1st from 2 to 7 p.m. in the business school. So please come back and check it out. It's going to be incredible. Next up, we have Sage Fertel and Ileana Rugel, who worked with Highland and the Council of Descendant Advisors, and with support from Dr. Lisa Armstrong and Dr. Sarah Bon Harper, to explore how cultivating repair on historic landscapes can be done through co-creation of an environmental justice learning model. Sage and Ileana.
Okay, awesome. All right, hello everyone. My name is Eliana Rugel. My pronouns are she, they, and I'm a sophomore studying biology and environmental science.
And my name is Sage Futrell. My pronouns are she, they, and I'm a senior studying anthropology and biology here at William and Mary.
And we're going to talk to you today about our project. So across the US, there are hundreds of plantation museums that together receive millions of visitors each year. Many of these sites focus on the history of the site owners, particularly if they were important figures in the US history. But there is a growing movement to portray a more complete history, centering the experiences of those enslaved on these sites. Often, this is done through collaboration with and input from the descendants of those who were enslaved. This movement, however, is still new, and there remains a need for former plantation sites to engage in reparative efforts with local descendant communities impacted by slavery. Additionally, through this project, we hope to address the national lack of education opportunities related to Black foodways and agricultural innovations.
The site of our research is one such former plantation site, James Monroe's Highland, which is located in Charlottesville, Virginia. As the name suggests, Highland is known as being the past estate of James Monroe, the 4th president of the US. However, that is just one part of the history. The Highland Council of Descendant Advisors is the community that we worked with for this project. They are made up of community members who are descended from those who were enslaved at Highland. The council was founded in 2017 in light of Highland's recent efforts to acknowledge the site's overlooked history. And in collaboration with Highland, the council has been providing input on exhibit interpretations and initiating many community engagement projects. And one of these projects became ours, the Highland Education Project.
So the steps that we took to make this project happen are kind of enumerated here, summarized briefly. We needed to develop lesson content, and this was done in collaboration with the Descendants Council and with local community partners. We then actually ran 2 one-day pilot summer programs aiming to understand the experiences and perceptions of the campers who were present. And finally, we are still in the process of evaluating the outcomes of the program so that we can design a framework that will hopefully help future programming at Highland. And descendant input is kind of put at the beginning of this process, but it's important throughout the whole process.
So the main goal of the project was to, as envisioned by the Highland Council of Descendant Advisors, was to create a reparative educational experience for local youth. This is a goal that was, as mentioned, the council guided and influenced us throughout the process of the summer program, which was very important as we consider how this program can promote repair and positive ecological relationships beyond Highland to other natural landscapes that have previously been sites of trauma. So how did we do this? We worked with a variety of community partners to design lessons that fit within the themes of the program, which included a focus on Black foodways, agriculture, the environment, and the history of Highland.
So yeah, as we mentioned, we had 2 one-day pilot programs that were packed with content. On the first day, we had 7 campers aged 9 through 11 from the local Charlottesville community. And on the second day, we had 8 campers from Star Hill Pathways, which is also based in Charlottesville. It's a career pathways program at UVA.
So for the data collection process, we used a mixed methodology, including participant observation and engaged ethnography, which you can see here, as well as qualitative surveying through art activities and feedback forms, which were used to evaluate like campers' engagement with the program. Here you can see some examples of the survey responses that we received. The numbers indicate the number of campers who responded to the prompts on the left column. But as you'll see, this was just a small piece of our data.
So now we're going to go into the key takeaways. One is the importance of place-based learning. So with Highland being an outdoor natural site with a lot of history, it provides a lot of opportunities for place-based learning, and we really noticed how impactful this was. And I'll give you kind of an anecdote to illustrate this. On the first day, we had a lesson about gardening, actually in Highland's garden. And students just asked a lot of questions about the plants they were seeing, about the bugs they were seeing, and they were especially curious about the hot pepper plants that were there. And they were really surprised to find out that they were indeed spicy. So these learning experiences really wouldn't have happened if we were learning about a garden in a classroom instead of learning actually in a garden.
Our second key takeaway was that throughout this project, communication is key. This project relied heavily on maintaining and building relationships with leaders who could serve as facilitators and content partners. Pictured here are some of the partners who worked with us on both days of the pilot programming, including the Piedmont Master Gardeners on the left, and on the right is Natasha Crawford, who is the owner of Healing Hope Urban Gardens.
Another big takeaway is that for collecting camper feedback, written surveys are not likely to engage them. In future programs, we will recommend alternative methods such as survey games, like putting stickers on what you agree on, or 4 corners.
Our final key takeaway regarding the formatting of lessons is that balance is important. So on the first day of our programming, we had Philip Cobbs, owner of Buck Island Farm, pictured here on the left, teach a lesson about soil health, which was primarily a sit-down lecture in an indoor setting. Wanting to keep the theme of hands-on learning present throughout the program, we asked Mr. Cobbs if he would be interested in incorporating a shelling and planting activity into day 2. This addition helped keep campers engaged throughout the lesson and learn more about a specific food crop, that being black-eyed peas, pictured here.
And finally, what did the students get out of this program? Well, we are very confident when we say that they all learned something new, even if they had, say, already been in a chicken coop, like the one here. There was sure to be another lesson that was new to them. And I also like to believe that although it was a short experience, it was definitely a memorable one because of all the new experiences that were offered.
We wanted to emphasize again that this project couldn't have been possible without our community partners, many of whom are directly connected to members of the HDCA. Some of them led lessons while others supported transportation and meals, but all of their contributions were essential to getting this program off the ground. Building trust was an important part of this project. So it was vital that we worked with organizations and people who share a vision with the HCDA and are already well established in the community. We wanted to give special thanks to HCDA member Jennifer Stacy for helping throughout the recruitment process and keeping those connections strong, as well as Pastor Lehman Bates of Ebenezer Baptist Church, who provided logistical support and also connected us with our first cohort of campers.
Yeah, so the Highland and the Highland Council of Descendant Advisors, through all of their efforts, and including this project, have demonstrated that plantation landscapes can be meaningful sites for repair through holistic education and community engagement. It's important that projects and actions that attempt to do this are intentional and collaborative, and they come from a place of building trust and listening to needs. And finally, we wanted to thank our research advisors. Here's a picture of us with them, Dr. Bon Harper and Dr. Armstrong. They really helped and led us through this project a lot. So thank you to them.
Yeah. So I'm going to read a reflection from Dr. Sarah Bon Harper, who's faculty here at William & Mary, as well as the director of Highland and an incredible partner of the ICE. Sage and Eliana have contributed a significant component to a long-term project that was envisioned by Highland's Council of Descendant Advisors. Stepping into the project at a crucial moment, they developed a pilot program and set Highland up with a tested curriculum for fostering positive relationships between young community members and the historic landscape. These relationships focused on topics of food traditions and productions, led to important food justice, conservation, and sustainability principles. It has been a joy to watch Sage and Eliana grow and develop in their role and finish their project with strong conclusions. Thank you so much, Sarah and Dr. Lisa Armstrong, and to Sage and Eliana. Great job. Next up, we have Sydney Fox, who worked with the Blue Sky Fund and with support from Dr. Catherine Lenowit to explore how environmental programs influence children's changing understanding of socio-ecological systems in Richmond, Virginia.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sydney Fox, and I'm with the City Ecosystems Project. And before I officially start my presentation, I would love it if everyone could just close their eyes for a second and think back to the first childhood memory that comes to your head, like something really memorable to you. And then you can open your eyes if you close them. And then anybody can raise your hand. How many of you, your memory was outside? And how many of your memories were in nature? Yeah. And that's what my project is about. So I'm working in collaboration with Blue Sky Fund, which is an organization based in Richmond, which takes kids from the urban or the city areas and takes them to the surrounding areas that are more rural, like state parks and farms, like near the city. And so my conservation challenge is that Blue Sky Fund doesn't really have a way of assessing how the youth is getting doesn't have a way of assessing how the youth is being affected by their program. So that's what we're working on. My research question is what methods we can use to assess how this connection to nature is changing over the course of this program. So my objectives are to record and analyze children's experiences with the outdoors using video, audio, and photography, summarize from literature's methods used to measure connection to nature, design evaluation methods to align with the Blue Sky Fund's goals, and to test and evaluate methods to assess effectiveness and clarity for our chosen demographic. So the first thing we did was conduct a literature review, which is actually ongoing, which is going to be used to choose which methods we're using with the kids and how to actually assess those methods. Because in these kind of programs, the assessments are like drawing, photography, those kind of things. So they're more open to interpretation. They can be harder to understand, etc. So that was a literature review. We then analyzed children's experiences. I assisted on a couple of the trips, the Blue Sky Fund field trips. I wore a GoPro and we walked around with the kids and did their activities with them. And so we used those observations to further cater the assessment methods to the kids. We designed the assessments using the literature review. So we chose, like, this is an example of an assessment that we designed based on the literature review, and we implemented it when we visited the first site. So this actually, we had them write a memory from each of their field trips to see like what stuck out to them, what they observed, what they enjoyed during the trip. We're going to evaluate more so in the future. It's an ongoing project. And then we're going to communicate our results, which is what we're doing now. And we're also going to present at future conferences. So one of our main key findings was that art, as in like drawing and photography, is really important. Here are some examples of drawings that the kids did with some of their journals, which Blue Sky Fund makes for their field trips. So the previous drawing prompt was draw a picture of your environment, which, like, what does that mean for an elementary schooler? Are they like, do they understand the prompt? Because at this point, like, they're learning about the environment, so they don't really know what it is yet. So that was the original prompt. So we changed it actually to draw a picture of yourself in the outdoors to hopefully make it more clear what we mean by that. And so hopefully it unlocks a memory for them and we can further understand their connection to nature through their memories. One of our other findings was that interview techniques and survey assessments are really important. This was the original survey they had on the back of the drawing, which has 3 questions and 3 scales, which is not that all-encompassing of the experience that they're having. And it doesn't give us a lot of detail on how they're feeling about it. So we expanded it to 10 questions, and there's 5 like numbers on the scale now to further, give us more detail and help us understand what they're actually thinking about. And yeah, the things we noticed, there's very little research into children of color in urban areas, relationship with nature, especially in US cities. And there's no consistent definition of nature for urban populations and connection to nature. So some of the key findings, as I mentioned before, we improved the previous drawing prompts. We also piloted a photography and video recording program where I gave them digital recorders and disposable cameras, and they had them walk around and record things that they found interesting and take pictures of things. Those are going to be analyzed. The recordings are being analyzed currently, and the photos need to be developed because they're disposable cameras, but those are ongoing to be analyzed soon. The journal setup was also improved because of our observations, and the scale was adapted to further encompass how they actually felt on the trips. So key takeaways. There's also this research should provide a concentration of methods of evaluating children's perceptions, add a non-deficit perspective to the environmental education field, address the gap in knowledge between minoritized populations, urbanization, and environmental education, and build knowledge on how important nature is for development. There's still in progress, as I mentioned earlier, analyzing the video and audio again, and supporting the qualitative coding that we're doing, and developing the photos and reanalyzing the videos, and hopefully following up with students to see if they can caption their photos to see really what interested them in their photos. So some people I'd like to acknowledge, Blue Sky Fund and Josh Bierman, who is the program director. Dr. Catherine Lanowet, who works with the School of Education as my faculty mentor, Fairfield Court Elementary School, Henry Marsh Elementary School, and Ms. Johnson's third grade class, which we worked very closely with, and Camille Andrews, who is a library researcher here and who helped me structure my literature review. Thank you.
So I'd like to invite Dr. Catherine Lanowet, if you'd like to come up and reflect, as well as Josh Behrman, if you're joining us via Zoom, to unmute.
Josh Bierman is listening in. He's a black box on the Zoom because he's currently on a trip with young kids in Richmond doing awesome things. So hello, Josh. We just wanted to highlight the contributions of the work of Sydney. In particular, Black and Brown children living in cities have vibrant, multifaceted connections to the worlds in which they live, learn, and play. Yet environmental ed programming and the research field of environmental education often overlooks, ignores, or paints deficit understandings of children's relationships in cities. Blue Sky Fund is an amazing program that currently runs programming for 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders in Richmond City, an Explorers program where 1,800 kids a year go out into city spaces and have amazing experiences. Sydney has joined the project and really helped Blue Sky Fund think about what are kids learning? We know powerful experiences are happening, but what are they learning? How are they learning? And I would say this is a broader question in the research field. Again, overlooked, marginalized area of research. So we're really excited. And lastly, we just both wanted to say, from strapping on a GoPro and jumping into a full day with 3rd graders outdoors, also to piloting research methods, really novel, that Sydney is really piloting and innovating on. Sydney has demonstrated flexibility, creativity, and a keen intellect that has guided our project. So Josh and I are super grateful, and we're excited to keep learning. So thank you.
Can't imagine that GoPro data. All right. Next up, we have Noah Rudish, who worked with American Prairie and with support from Dr. Robert Rose and Dr. Pallavi Kundu to explore associations between leopard frogs and beaver dams to inform prairie restoration in Montana. Hi, everybody. So behind the words on the screen here, you see an image of the North American prairie or Great Plains in Montana. This prairie ecosystem is incredibly valuable, supporting a wide assemblage of species, providing carbon sequestration, and provisioning socioeconomic benefits. But this prairie is at threat, with over 50% of the historical shortgrass prairie extent being lost in recent years. So my name is Noah, and my goal of this project is trying to understand how we can restore the American prairie broadly, but more specifically through understanding linkages between beaver dams and northern leopard frogs, which occupy this ecosystem. So the organization that I've been partnered with through this project is called American Prairie. Their goal is to create a restored and connected functioning prairie ecosystem through connecting private and public lands and creating a reserve with all the native species that originally resided in the area. My project focuses on a small subset of this prairie ecosystem, streams and riparian areas pictured here on the right. These areas cover less than 1% of the prairie landscape, but they are incredibly important as the prairie is very arid and relies on water to support its biodiversity. Again, these streams and riparian areas are under threat from human activities, such as agriculture and damming. So I dialed in on beaver dams, which are very important on streams and riparian areas. Beaver dams act as ecological engineers. They kind of create a meandering stream path, which supports the creation of ecological niches for different species. They raise the water table, as you can see here, and they also support increased vegetation. American Prairie has been piloting beaver dam analogs, which are human-created structures that are supposed to mimic the same ecological functions as these beaver dams. Kind of to measure the effectiveness of these beaver dams, I was specifically looking at these associations with northern leopard frogs, which are an amphibian species that resides in streams and riparian areas, and previous studies in other ecosystems has looked at the relationship with beaver dams. So I wanted to explore that in this prairie ecosystem. So my project kind of functioned as a preliminary field study.
And so I formatted it with sort of a research hypothesis that I wanted to share with you. So my hypothesis was that the presence of a beaver dam or a beaver dam analog on a prairie stream creates a higher water table or higher water level and favorable vegetative qualities, which in turn supports the presence of these northern leopard frogs. So here you can see a map of the American prairie boundaries, which is where I was doing the field study, and that little black rectangle up there is exactly where I was doing my surveys. And then here's just an up-close map of where exactly the sites were where I was doing my surveys. So I surveyed 12 different sites. The blue dots on the kind of bottom left are the beaver dam sites. The bottom right, the red dots are the beaver dam analog sites. And then kind of the top left and bottom right are my control sites that had neither of those. So what did my methodology look like? So first I started with field data collection, where I went to the prairie and I surveyed all these sites for leopard frogs, and I also collected a lot of other information about vegetative qualities and hydrological characteristics. Then after my field data collection in Montana, I went on to doing my data analysis using logistic regression modeling in R, and also just doing some qualitative observations. And so I was looking at two different response variables, so the beaver dams and the frog sightings, and looking at their associations with vegetative and hydrological characteristics, and also for the frog sightings, looking at their associations with the beaver dams. So I was kind of looking for what were the statistical associations between these things. So what were my results for this? So in all, I found 4 northern leopard frog individuals. Those were at 3 sites. 2 of those sites were beaver dams, and 1 of those sites was a control site. All the frogs that I found were directly in or next to a stream. And that could be for 2 reasons. One being that So one of the reasons that they were found directly in or next to a stream could be due to the fact that the frogs rely on the stream for their habitat, very importantly. Another reason could be low detection probability in this thick vegetation. Additionally, 5 out of the 12 stream sites that I surveyed did not have flowing water. These streams were ephemeral, and these frogs rely on streams with water. And unfortunately, all the beaver dam analog sites happened to be dry, meaning that I had to exclude them from my statistical analysis. And then, so I tested over 30 different models, looking at associations. None of the models were statistically significant, but that doesn't mean that there weren't any important associations that could be observed. And on the right, we have a picture of the dry beaver dam analog site. Okay, so I just want to share with you guys this box plot that I created looking at the percentage of bare ground at sites with the presence of a beaver dam. So as you can see here, all of the upstream and downstream areas, there were much lower percentages of bare ground at sites that had beaver dams. So the beaver dams are the green box plots, and you can see they're much lower bare ground for the upstream and downstream. So that really shows that beaver dams providing these favorable vegetative characteristics to these stream sites. As you can tell, the non-beaver dam sites have much higher levels of bare ground. So that's an interesting finding that I found as part of this project. So what are the management implications? Oh, sorry, I'm gonna go this. So what are some future study recommendations as I was kind of conducting a preliminary study? So 1, it'll be important to sample additional sites for this project to kind of have a more complete data set. 2, it will be important to measure more vegetative quadrats per site to get a more complete data set with vegetation data and have it be more robust. 3, it's important to adjust the sampling period to a different time, potentially to August, where the juvenile tadpoles have metamorphosized into adult frogs, so there are more adult frog individuals to look at. 4, it'll be important to build up the beaver dam location database using citizen science, so allowing there to be a database of coordinates of all beaver dams in the area. And then the last study recommendation is to sample only sites with flowing water, because again, these frogs generally do not associate with dry areas. Okay, so I just want to talk about the management implications of what I've been doing. So just broadly, this research shows that it's very important to continue preserving and protecting riparian areas on the American prairie. They are such a small subset of the ecosystem, but they support such a variety of species and processes. And especially with the increased vegetative recruitment of the beaver dams, it really shows a positive benefit to the ecosystem that really needs to be explored through future studies and looking more closely at that relationship between the frogs and the beaver dams. So I just wanted to thank everyone who helped me with this project. Special thanks to Dr. Robert Rose, Dr. Daniel Kinka, Erica, Garut, Dr. Philippi Kundu, and Dr. Mitchell Sirota, who all helped me with this project and supported me and guided me along the way. Thank you.
Have a brief reflection from NOAA's mentor from American Prairie, Danny Kinka.
Greetings from Lewistown, Montana. Daniel Kinka, the director of Rewilding in American Prairie. And I just wanted to express my gratitude to NOAA and William and Mary's Institute for Integrative Conservation for their help in helping us research the work of our colleagues doing beaver dam analogs, riparian restoration at American Prairie, and what impact that has on both vegetation and wildlife, including northern leopard frogs. Thanks to NOAA's work, I think we have a better understanding of where these things work and where they don't. Namely, beaver dam analogs in dry earth streams have fewer biological consequences than we may have expected and seem to do more hydrological work. And in wetter areas, beaver dams are doing things that we expect, which is sequestering water, growing new kinds of vegetation across larger areas, and supporting things like northern leopard frogs. On a personal level, it was also, I learned quite a lot about working with undergraduate students and William and Mary's program, thanks to NOAA, and in a good way. I was very pleased to find that both her and Valerie were incredibly self-sufficient while they were in the field, which means that I was able to spend my time working with NOAA as an intellectual peer rather than someone who needed help kind of getting around out there. And that's no small feat if you've ever been to American Prairie. Thank you very much for the opportunity. NOAA, I wish you all the best, although I know you don't get any luck. I'm proud of what you came up with, and I look forward to working with William and Mary and the IIC going forward. Take care.
All right, next up we have Ari Van Dam and Noah Craig, who worked with the Friends of the Dragon Run and with support from Dr. Robert Rose to explore how to mitigate the risks of economic and ecological harm posed by invasive species in the Dragon Run watershed.
Hi, good afternoon. I would like to start us off with a brief statistic that invasive species, both plants and animals, cost Virginia alone $1 billion every single year in both mitigation and ecological damage. And if you know anything about Virginia invasive plants, then you might recognize a couple of these names here: Tree of Heaven, Chinese privet, and autumn olive. But all three of these are larger and, frankly, as invasive as they are, a little easier to deal with than the plants that we focused on this summer. And this is our project, which was to identify both the drivers and how and where these invasive plants spread. I'm Ari, this is Noah. We worked in collaboration with Robert Rose and the IIC, and we were with Friends of Dragon Run, and this is the Dragon Run.
Yeah, so as Ari said, our research over the summer was in the Dragon Run watershed. It's a pristine blackwater swamp in Virginia's Middle Peninsula, about an hour north of here. That contains a multitude of rare and endangered species. And our research partners were the Friends of Dragon Run, which is a nonprofit volunteer-based organization that manages several properties within the watershed. And like many protected areas within the Southeast, the Dragon Run is facing challenges with invasive species. So in order to help address those challenges, me and Ari identified two of the most noxious weeds within the Dragon Run, and that's Chinese bush clover and Japanese honeysuckle. And I'll let Ari talk about the latter.
Yeah, Japanese honeysuckle, if you're unfamiliar, is a small opportunistic woody stem vine that covers large tracts of land and can smother out smaller native vegetation, which has cascading impacts going up the food chain. And so my few objectives for this was, first, we have to determine where actually in the Dragon Run this native invasive plant can be found, develop a habitat suitability model, which would be a map that shows where it is most likely to be found. Using that, determine areas that are most at risk and in need of prioritization in terms of mitigation efforts, and then determine cost estimates using that. So our approach, we made very, very frequent trips to the Dragon Run this summer. I spent a lot of time there just going around with the GPS tracker and getting as many occurrence points as I could. And all of this going towards the mapping that would influence where it might be found. So right off the bat, it was way more prevalent in the Dragon Run than previously thought. I alone got 837 individual points for Japanese honeysuckle, and I believe that to be an underestimate. And this was only across 3 properties within Dragon Run. However, the good news is that I believe a lot of this is in the early stages of invasion and just really emphasizes the need to get, prioritize areas that we should start mitigating this. And so if you are unfamiliar with the habitat suitability model, it essentially takes a lot of different layers like this, distance to water, tree cover, etc., combines them into one singular map showing where the species is most likely to be found. And after taking all of these and weighting them with these respective weights, came out to this final model, which is over the entire course of the Dragon Run. And these red things here specifically are Dragon Run properties. And even further zoomed in, you can see the individual plants that I took with the GPS tracker. And so everything in green is much more likely to be found Japanese honeysuckle, everything in red, least likely.
Yeah, so as I said earlier, my research focused on bush clovers. So bush clovers are small to medium-sized shrubby legumes that thrive in grasslands and prairies. And although the Dragon Run is a swampy watershed, it still has many properties that fall under those categories. And within those properties, there are several native bush clovers, including the trailing bush clover, the slender bush clover, and the violet bush clover. And these species serve as a vital part of the native food chain as a food source for local species. But the invasive bush clover is coming in and outcompeting these native species due to its lack of viability as a food source for the local animals. So in order to help address this issue, I asked the question, how prevalent are Chinese bush clovers in the Dragon Run watershed? And how does the presence of Chinese bush clover affect the presence of natives within the Dragon Run? So me and Ari have a pretty similar overall methods and timelines, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. But I also went into the field, visiting several Dragon Run properties, cataloging all the bush clovers I found, the invasive and the natives alike, their size, the composition of each cluster, where they were. I took it back, I got it ready for my GIS software, and I developed these maps. So on the left, you can see the Chinese bush clovers. On the right, you can see the native bush clovers. And you can take a second to look over the legend. That'll help you interpret it a bit. But generally, the main message here is that there's a significantly higher amount of Chinese bush clovers compared to the natives. And among the instances of the Chinese bush clovers, there is typically a higher density compared to that of the native instances. So after plotting this and seeing where the Chinese bush clover already is, I wanted to have a better idea of where else in the Dragon Run these instances could be. And that led me to also making a habitat suitability model. So these are the layers that I chose, where the red areas are unsuitable for Chinese bush clover and the green areas are suitable, and the yellow areas and orange that you can't really see, but the yellow areas are just a in-between value, and these are the weights that I used. And that led me to developing this final habitat suitability model, where the green areas are highly suitable and the yellow areas are somewhat suitable and the orange areas are unsuitable. And as you can see, large amounts of the Dragon Run watershed have at least some suitability for Chinese bush clover, if not high suitability. And these numbers were reflected in the stats I got after going through all my field data, where you can see that there's a much higher proportion of Chinese bush clover compared to natives, especially the violet and slender. You can see their populations are certainly dwindling compared to the invasive Chinese bush clover.
So what does this actually mean for the Dragon Run and Friends of Dragon Run? Both of our habitat suitability models are ranked everything on a scale of 0 to 1. And so high suitability hotspots of 0.7 and above are areas and acreage that Friends of Dragon Run should prioritize mitigation, and every single acre could fall within the $400 to $600 range, depending on methods of removal, be that herbicide or mechanical pulling. But we hope that these maps and our findings can help Friends of Dragon Run find areas that are most in need of mitigation and most at risk. And we would like to thank our partners at Friends of Dragon Run and everyone in the IIC who has helped us and been so generous with their time. Thank you all.
So Robin and Jeff from Friends of Dragon Run made this beautiful slide thanking Noah and Ari. I guess I'll read through it a bit. Working to preserve, protect, and encourage wise use of the Dragon Run watershed, Noah and Ari have furthered our understanding of the risk to native habitats from invasive plants. Their important were their individual contributions to our planning for mitigating the risk, costs, and landscape changes presented by Japanese honeysuckle and Chinese bush clover. They focused on challenges to get community consensus, resources, milestones, and actions. You're both great individuals to work with on solutions for the natural world as well as our communities. So thank you from the Friends of the Dragon Run. Robin and Jeff, I think you're joining over Zoom. We just want to thank you for being such wonderful partners for the IIC and for supporting Noah and Ari in this project. Great. We have two more presentations and then the reception. So next up, we have Pranjali Gupta, who has worked with Conservation X Labs and with support from Dr. Haipeng Chen and Dr. John Swaddle to explore how AI can be used as a tool to accelerate biodiversity conservation through the enhancement of the Extinction Species Index.
Imagine walking through a forest without birdsong or oceans without coral reefs. Right now, we're losing biodiversity faster than ever before. About 1 million species are at risk of extinction due to human activities. To solve this urgent extinction crisis, we need to better understand what's working and scale up the solutions that can truly make a difference. This summer, I worked with Conservation X Labs through the Conservation Research Program at William & Mary. My project focused on artificial intelligence and how it can make conservation knowledge, especially extinction solutions, more accessible and actionable. My name is Pranjali Gupta, and I'm a data science and finance double major at William & Mary. Species are disappearing because of few main drivers: climate change, invasive species, global warming, pollution, overexploitation. These forces are interconnected and accelerating. Every extinction not only means a species lost, but also an imbalance in the ecosystem that support all life, including ours. There are thousands of conservation projects and research studies happening globally, but there's no single place to easily access or compare what works. The data is fragmented across papers, databases, and organizations, making it difficult for conservationists to find, share, and scale up solutions. This is where AI comes in. AI has already transformed medicine, agriculture, and other fields, and now it's beginning to reshape conservation. Conservation X Labs created the Extinction Solutions Index, a tool to organize and assess global solutions to extinction. My role was to use AI to make this data more scalable, interactive, and useful through a chatbot interface. So this is the basic model of my chatbot. I used a lot of data in documents and converted those into embeddings and stored them on a vector database. I used ChatGPT API and using user input and also chat history, it would give you a desired output. My specific focus was on solutions targeting agriculture pollution, a key driver of biodiversity loss. So here's a demo of my chat. Sorry. So as you can see, Here's a quick demo. I asked the chatbot what are effective solutions for reducing agricultural runoff. It just went away. But and then after that answer, I also asked it follow-up questions about what countries will it benefit, areas where it would be helpful, what endangered species it would be helping. This is really preliminary. I am gonna build, as a part of my deliverable, build a front end, which would be a website for Conservation X Labs. Oh. Of course, conservation data changes daily. New studies, updated metrics, evolving threats. So there are some limitations and some room for scalability in the chatbot. Of course, my model is not perfect and it currently only uses static data. But this approach can scale to real-time updates. Future iterations could integrate live data sets, enabling conservationists to access the most up-to-date information. For Extinction Solutions Index, this chatbot means faster, smarter access to data, helping experts identify what works and where. For conservation at large, it's a step towards turning massive data into actionable insights, accelerating solutions to prevent extinction. This project showed me how data science and conservation aren't separate worlds. They're deeply connected. By combining computational tools with ecological understanding, we can bridge the gap between technology and the planet and design smarter, faster, and more scalable solutions for extinction. I would like to thank my mentors, Paul Bungie from Conservation X Labs, Professor John Swaddle and Professor Chen from William & Mary, and Erica and everyone else at the IIC for their support and guidance. Who knew Python could save the planet and not just crash my computer? Little humor for you. Thank you for listening.
So I'm going to briefly reflect on Pranjali's work from Conservation X Labs. Conservation X Labs is at the forefront of addressing the extinction crisis with the mission to prevent the sixth mass extinction. To do that, we need innovative technology and ambitious young scientists who are hopeful and creative. Pranjali's work will significantly influence the Extinction Solutions Index and will provide accessible information on how to prevent extinctions. We have appreciated working with Pranjali and know she is already and will continue doing amazing things. Another one from Dr. Chen. There are tons of data out there in a lot of conservation problems, such as the one that Pranjali has been working on, which were unfortunately very underutilized to help yield conservation solutions. Data scientists are usually not aware of these conservation problems and where the data are available, while conservationists know the pain points in data. They don't have the best idea of how to best extract useful information from it and generate actionable insights. Working together as the chatbot example that Pranjali has developed, we show that data scientists and conservationists can achieve a greater good for the environment and human society. Great job.
Thank you so much.
And our last presenter is Rebecca Fuchs, who worked with our own Director of Advancement, Brian Plum, from the IAC, to explore how a story of self can be used as a tool for building a youth-led conservation movement. So you can click here.
Wait, what am I clicking? This one to advance, yeah. All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. We're all here in the Hive today because in some way we are connected to each other and to conservation as well. Each of us carries our own story, shaped by the places that we've lived, the moments that have changed us, and the questions that keep us curious. As we sit here together, I want you to take a moment to think about your own story. What brought you here today? What is your connection to nature, to this work, to this calling that we all face? Maybe for some of you, it began with an early memory of the outdoors, of wildlife, or a place that felt like home. For others, it might come from a sense of justice, a belief that people on the planet deserve better. And for some, it's about data, innovation, or the power of community to create change. We're all coming together in this shared space, and I hope that we can cherish it together. So my name is Rebecca Fuchs. I'm a senior and I'm a public policy major and environmental science minor. And my project is Story First, Science Heard. We're exploring how to help conservation sound more human and more relatable as well. And because if people can't feel the story, they won't remember the science at all. And so as we see here, we've all seen these images before. The same old story, the same old thing, yada, yada, coral bleaching, pollution, deforestation, melting glaciers. and forests that are stripped bare. Also extinction, as Pranjali's project pointed out. And in the face of rapid environmental change, we all know the urgency and the stakes. But what we don't talk enough about is how these stories make people feel. Because too often, our conservation stories, the ones that we want to spark action with, end up doing quite the opposite. They make people feel small, hopeless, or even disconnected. And while documenting loss such as this to our planet and impact is essential, if this is really all that we show, then people will really start to tune out and they stop believing that change is even possible to begin with. And so here's the gap that my knowledge, that my research sought to show. In conservation, we have a lot of data, a lot of things, a lot of books, and a lot of resources, but we don't have enough stories to make people actually feel something, to be able to make that change possible. There's an urgent need for a different kind of storytelling, one that inspires hope and not despair, one that helps people to see themselves as part of the solution and not just witnesses to the problem, as we've all gathered here today to show. And that's where Story of Self comes in. The Story of Self was developed by a Harvard professor, Dr. Marshall Gans, a legendary community organizer who's helped shape conservation movements around the world. It's a storytelling framework that starts not just with data, but with you, all of you in this room. And it asks what moments shaped your values and which challenges have tested your values. And by sharing these personal stories, honestly and vulnerably, we can connect with others around a shared cause. And so the goal of my project was quite simple. It was to build a framework that helps II students like ourselves, and like the ones that we've heard from today, tell their stories in ways that encourage people to act for change. And to do that, I started by conducting a full lit review, exploring best practices in storytelling, and how the Story of Self framework could be adapted for conservation and for our lab. And then I brought these ideas to life through a storytelling workshop and a series of in-depth interviews with past and current CRP students, which you'll hear from later in this presentation. And through those conversations, I began translating what I learned into a practical toolkit for the IIC, something that future CRP cohorts can use to help find their own voice and inspire collective action through conservation. And so from my lit review, I found three key takeaways that shaped how I actually make this toolkit. And so first, the most powerful stories that I found were ones that are authentic, ones that are from the heart, and ones that recognize that trust isn't an automatic process. And especially when working with marginalized or vulnerable communities, as we do a lot here, it has to be earned through honesty, empathy, and care. And second, storytelling is a form of power. Stories shape how people see the world. They define who belongs, they define who leads, and whose voices are heard or whose voices aren't heard, which we seek to change. That's why storytelling should always be done with intention and awareness of its risks and responsibilities, especially in public-facing or institutional spaces like ours. And third, my third takeaway, stories are itinerant, are imperfect, and not always finished. A story of self itself is never finished, and it grows and changes as much as we grow and change through our lives. And vulnerability is not a weakness, despite what you might be hearing. It's a sign of reflection and deep growth. And so one of the biggest lessons that I learned this year was that facilitating storytelling is as much about care as it is about creativity. When I first led the Story of Self workshop with our CRP students who graduated last year in the spring, most of them have never even heard about Story of Self framework before. So my first goal was not actually to get perfect stories, because that wasn't going to happen if people don't even know what the framework is. It was to make people feel safe to share their stories and to be vulnerable in a safe space together. And this meant moving slowly, listening deeply, and respecting boundaries, and respecting the word no, too, because we heard that a lot. And if somebody needed to pause, rephrase, or even step out, that was okay. Trust, communication, and honesty were always more important than getting it right the first time. And we carried that same spirit into our summer fieldwork with our current CRP students. And so, as you see here, Taylor, as we heard earlier today, and Percy, who's right over there, was one of the stories that I documented as well. The Indigenous Foodways team sitting in our front. That was also one that we did with our Indigenous people piece up on the top there. And so there were times we had to stop filming. We had to stop reshooting. And as Percy knew, sometimes we had technical difficulties that didn't allow us to get to where we wanted to go. And yet, all of those mistakes, all of those things are part of the process. Storytelling is not about perfection. It never was. It's about reflection, growth, and connection. And so when someone shares an authentic story, something truly powerful and magical happens. People see themselves in that story and they connect. And that connection is what transforms awareness into action. And that's the heart of the Story of Self framework. When we share honestly about what moves us, what scares us, what transforms us, people begin to see what's possible for them too. And through this toolkit, the goal is to help IIC students, past, present, and future, tell stories that don't just inform, but they inspire. Stories that turn research into relationships and relationships into collective conservation action. And so I wanted to share an example of a past CRP student who just graduated, and his name is Liam. And Liam was a student that we did one of our workshops with. And earlier this year, he shared something really vulnerable with all of us. And so what I really love about Liam's story about cheetahs here is that how it comes full circle. So we start here with an early conservation experience, him being concerned about the loss of cheetahs in our world. And then he transformed that into going into Nepal and studying how human carnivore conflict relationships occur and how his love for cheetahs sort of inspired his work in Nepal as well. And so it shows how an early spark of wonder, how something so early shaped him even to his college years and changes him to a lifelong purpose. And so stories like Liam's here remind us that conservation begins with a personal spark, a personal why, and it grows through conservation and connection as well. And so my goal now, looking forward, is to help current and future CRP students to tell stories like Liam's, stories that connect hearts to science. And so the IIC Story of Self Toolkit is designed to help us craft and share these stories, both internally and with the outside world, grounded in authenticity, empathy, and reflection. And it builds community through a shared purpose of all of us together. And that helps to advance conservation solutions through human connection, like we're doing right now. Because when people connect through story, collaboration becomes possible. And so I began my story with all of you today, asking you to reflect on your own. What brought you here? What is your why? Why does this work actually matter to you? And my hope is that you carry that story forward beyond this room and beyond those doors over there. Because your authentic story, your why, has the power to move hearts, bridge divides, and inspire action. Because when we weave those stories together, that's how we create change and solve global conservation challenges. So I wanted to leave off here with, what story do you want to tell? And if we work together, every story has the power to move hearts, build bridges, and shape a future where people and nature thrive. And so together we can, and we will. Let's say that together, y'all.
Together. Well.
Thank you so much. And before I close, I just want to take a moment to recognize the people that made this project possible. If you can wave or just let us know that you're here, that'd be great. The first person I'd like to thank is Erica Garut, who would not have been able to make this possible, for her leadership, patience, and for helping me find the bridge between science and storytelling, and pushing me through my master procrastination to actually get this project done in the first place. That was us yesterday, actually. And then Brian Plum, our Director of Advancement, who's sitting in the back, for his support, insight, and belief in the power of narrative to advance conservation. And of course, all of us in the Institute for Integrative Conservation for the opportunity, the funding, and the community that made this possible. And so every great story starts somewhere, but it's the people that walk beside you that make it meaningful. Thank you for being part of mine, and I hope you can be part of mine as well.
Thanks, Cindia. I'm going to invite Brian to come up and reflect. Thank you for